one of these days, I'll catch just a little bit of his talent and be able to sing a little bit better here. I keep hoping. Okay, like I said, there's been a theme, and it's called victory. And that's because, let's face it, people are truly worried and upset these days. The future is uncertain. We have no idea what's going to happen in this nation of ours. But it doesn't look good. We're worried about our nation. We're worried about, will we even have a civil war again? We're worried. Our nation is becoming so much more sinful that we're worried that God won't let it stand the way that it is. We're worried about the church. Churches are getting smaller. In the 1960s, we were the fastest growing religious group. That's not true anymore. If you look out upon the congregations, we don't have many crying babies. We got a lot of snow-covered members, but not a lot of crying babies. We're not the young guns anymore. I can remember when I was one of the young guns out there going to blaze the way for the church into the future. I'm almost 70 now. I'm not a young gun anymore. I looked at the establishment and it was me. That's hard for children of the 60s, is to look at the establishment and realize that's me now. We were different. Many in the church are worried about the future of the church. They see it dwindling. They see doctrines coming in that are foreign to the scriptures. And honestly, it sure looks like there's truly dark days ahead. But I want you to turn now to the book of Ecclesiastes. And we're going to go to chapter 1. Now, if you found the first chapter, go to verses 9 and 10. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a new thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. And I'm going to read a little bit of verse 11. There is no remembrance of former things. The fact is, the dark days that we're afraid of, that's nothing new. It's happened before, many, many times. My hardest thing in getting this sermon is to figure out which of those to not talk about. Because there's so many times that has been the reality. But in verse 11 it said there's no remembrance of former things. And I think that's part of the problem we have when we face dark days, is we don't have a remembrance of the things that have gone on. We think that it's all brand new. that this is the first time that the Lord's people have been worried about false doctrines coming in. That this is the first time that the Lord's people have worried about their nation. It's not true. It's happened many, many times. In 1 Kings, the 19th chapter, I'm not going to read the whole chapter because it's something that I think we do know, but you can write it down, 1 Kings 19. The prophet Elijah, he was more than discouraged, more than depressed. He was at the end of his rope. And he said he was the only one left. I'm just the only one. And they're out to kill me. That's what he's talking about in 1 Kings 19. But God told him that there were 7,000 who had not bowed their knee to Baal. So when we think that we're the last one left, that the church is dwindling, it's just not going to do it. We need to remember those things passed. When Elisha said, I'm the only one left, and God said, no, there's 7,000 that haven't bowed their knee to Baal. And then he said, and all your enemies will be destroyed. They're not going to kill you, but the people that I have you appoint will take care of them. God has not changed. We're not the only ones left, and God will take care of our enemies. That's something that he did then, and he will do it again. I want you to turn now to the book of Habakkuk. I'll give you plenty of time to find Habakkuk, because that's not one of the books that we use the most often. In fact, it's even hard for me to find on my Kindle. You know, you're going, where is Habakkuk? Oh, I know it's in the Old Testament. When you get Habakkuk, go to the first chapter. I'm making it easy on you. And then we're going to read verses 1, 2, and 3. The oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? And why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. And I'm going to keep reading down here. So the law is paralyzed, justice never goes forth, for the wicked surround the righteous. So justice goes forth perverted. That almost sounds like a sermon from any of today's pulpits, doesn't it? Yep, there's nothing new under the sun. It's happened before. Now Habakkuk gets an answer, and we will deal with that toward the end. But I want us to see that feeling is not new. And God has always taken care of it. Every time. I want you to turn now to Revelation, the 2nd chapter. The book of Revelation. That's easy. Turn to the back of your book just before the concordance. And we'll turn to the 2nd chapter of the book of Revelation. And we'll start with verse 8. And to the angel of the church in Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last, who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, that you are rich, and the slander of those who say they are Jews but are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. Like I said, I had to throw a lot of stuff out. There were several other churches in the first part of the book of Revelation that have a very similar thing. Trouble's coming. Don't get downhearted. You're going to win. In fact, that's the entire theme of the book of Revelation. If we study the book of Revelation, we'll get into a whole lot of symbols and a whole lot of visions and a whole lot of everything. But let me tell you, if you want the Reader's Digest version of the book of Revelation, we win. Satan loses. Everything else is just fluff. That is the message of the book of Revelation. It's not about the trumpets. It's not about the bowls. It's about we win. Every one of those symbols symbolizes the victory in Jesus for Christians. I want to give an illustration, though, because some people are just really worried that the church won't survive. I want you to think about the Dark Ages. That was a time when Bibles were chained to pulpits. When Bibles were in a language that only the priests could speak. It was a time of religious tyranny. Luther and Zwingli and other people said, wait a second, this is not the pure, perfect church that I read about in my Bible. This one that I go to on Sunday. This is not right. So they wanted to reform the church and make it better. And that's good. Now in the late 1700s and early 1800s, people in Scotland and the United States said, well, I have a better idea. We've reformed this, but I don't want to reform it. I want to restore it. It's like those of us who are car guys. You know what? You can hot rod some cars, but you'll never do better than taking that 1940 Ford and restoring it to exactly what it was. Making it just what it was. I mean, you know, it took all those years before things started looking better. Luther, the Restoration Movement, and balderdash. That's not true. I knew a man, Brother Traylor was his name. He was an army chaplain in World War II. After the war was over, he was in Germany. And he and some of the other missionaries and members of the church were holding a gospel meeting in Munich, Germany. Munich wasn't part of the Restoration Movement. You went back to, if you were German, you were either Lutheran or Catholic. That's what everybody thought. So he's there and they're preaching this gospel meeting, and there are these German men sitting right up front and giving him that look. And, you know, we here in America can give that look, but we can't do it nearly as good as the Germans. The Germans, when they're happy, seem like they're about to break your face. You know, they just have that demeanor. And so just imagine religious Germans. They're sitting there and they are listening to every word. When it's over, they get up and they say, tell us what you believe on. And they took the preachers and quizzed them. What do you believe on this? How do you believe on this? What do you do? They put them through the ringer. Because what they heard sounded very like what they had been taught and been preaching. And it was. They were seeing if they could fellowship these people from America. Because the church in Munich wasn't part of any restoration movement. Brother Hans Grimm wrote a book that's it is so far out of publication that you have to go to some huge library to find them. That just happens sometimes. His name was 700 Years of the Church of Christ in Europe. He documented that what we call the restored church had been in Europe for 700 years. He was doing this. The book came out in about 1950. What does that tell you? 1200s. That it had been there unchanged for 700 years. In the middle of the Dark Ages, it's still there. That's what he could document. He had the oral history, because there comes a point where there are no documents. There is nothing that you can prove. Because that's what the Dark Ages were. The story that they had been told was that several disciples of John who worshipped in the city of Ephesus migrated to Europe and planted the church there. And it continued unchanged from the late first century until this very day. When we think of the Dark Ages, we think, oh, the church disappeared, and it wasn't until the reformers or the restorers came. It was just, no. We have historical evidence that in the darkest of times, the Dark Ages, God always took care of his people. He always left a remnant. That should give us cheer looking at all the things that happen. If there were to be another Dark Age, well, guess what? We wouldn't have to wait 700 years for somebody to find the truth and preach it again, somewhere, the Lord's church will be doing fine. It might not be Washburn. It might not be the United States. We don't know. But we do know that the Lord's church is doing fine and will do fine forever. In fact, I want you to turn now to the book of Ephesians. We're going to go to the 5th chapter, do verses 25 through 27. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy without blemish. Don't you worry about the Lord's church. The Lord will take care of his church. Worry about yourself, that you're part of that spotless church without blemish. Don't you worry about his church. He'll take care of his church. Now I'm going to go back to Habakkuk, and we're going to go to the 3rd chapter. Verses 17 through 19. After listening to the Lord and knowing that things were bad and they weren't going to get better for quite a while, this is Habakkuk's response. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor the fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. That's the answer. When you look at the dark days, doesn't matter how dark they get. It never matters how bad it is. The Lord God is our strength. And he makes me tread on high places. I'm not down in the valley of death. I'm up on the mountain of God. The thing is, the Lord will take care of his church. I want you to turn back now to the book of Joshua. In chapter 24. Lord will take care of his people. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to be able to say, like Joshua did, in verse 15, he said, this is chapter 24, and if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. If you take that passage in Habakkuk and add this to the end of it, you'll understand why all the songs we've been singing were about victory. Because it doesn't matter what it looks like. We win, Satan loses. The only thing we have to decide is, do we want to be on the winning team? And I don't know about you, but I hate to lose. 9:22.